YouTube, what's up, what's happening? Bringing you another video. And I thought it was about time I remade my how to airbrush for beginners video. It's been a good, I think, 8 or 9 years or something. Long time. So I thought I'd bring you guys an HD version, a more in-depth, detailed version. Um, First off, before we get started, anything having to do with even painting, let's get started with some supplies, some things you'll need, some things to get you started that'll help out a lot. Let me just get on the other side of the camera here. And, as you can see, I have this easel here. This is a pretty basic one. Like, I've literally got it at Hobby Lobby for 10 bucks. And it adjusts, it goes up and down. And you'll never realize how important an easel is until you don't have one and when you need it. It's great for setting stuff up like this and painting while you're standing, or even if you have a bench, you can set up a bench and paint. I'd definitely recommend an easel. I'd recommend some kind of face mask too. Sometimes you're going to be working in a enclosed area, or you're going to be working with paints that are pretty tough on your lungs, so a good face mask is always good and nice to have. A hair blow dryer, I would recommend a heat gun, but for airbrushing you really don't need to apply heat. You just need to dry stuff off, and you need it to get relatively warm or hot, but you don't want to burn or singe anything off. And a heat gun can really cause damage to a lot of products that are plastic, rubber. But a hairspray, a hair dryer like this works really good. You work it on low setting, and it works really good, especially for working on black. If you're spraying black, like on a black shirt, and you're spraying white, if you have this going at the same time, it helps the white, just pop a whole lot better. You're eventually going to need a compressor too. You're going to need a compressor to spray. I always recommend stuff with tanks. I know everybody always wants one of those silent compressors, and those are all great. I guess if you can afford one, because the actual good ones are really, really expensive, and we're talking about in the thousands of dollars. But one of these is great. Get you a long air hose like that one, and just run it. Just put it outside or something, run the air hose in through your window, or if you have a closet, put it in a closet, and it'll be fine. I'd recommend something with at least 3-gallon tank. Anything smaller than 3 gallons, it's gonna be turning on a lot, and stuff like that. Especially if you're working with 40 or 50 psi. This is kind of the bare minimum. This one over here is 8 gallons, and this one over here works a lot better. These are both pretty loud, so you got to keep that in mind. But all you really want it for is the air. This is not gonna help you paint in any way. The more expensive the compressor is not gonna run your airbrush better. Basically, you just need it to hold air in this tank, and you need the air pressure supply to be constant. Those little diaphragm compressors, those are usually not very good because they don't have a tank, so you get a pulse in the line while you're spraying, and you'll get a lot of spitting and stuff. So definitely get yourself a nice compressor with a tank. Other than that, you're going to want some paper towels. Paper towels are always great for practicing on, and they're also great picking up spills, spill some paint and stuff like that. These will save your day all the time, and you can throw them away. You don't have to worry about them. Paper towels is great. You're going to need some kind of tape. I would suggest different thicknesses of tape, different kinds of tape. The more tape, the better. And to go with the tape, you're going to need a roll of paper. Any areas you don't want to get paint on, you're going to want to tape off and, paper up, because with an airbrush, overspray will get everywhere. Paint. Everybody always asks me what kind of paint I should buy, or what kind of paint do you use, and honestly, I just use Createx. If it would focus. It's just easy to find. So, if you live in other parts of the world, I don't know if Createx is so easy to find, but I would just go with whatever's easiest for you to find. If you could find something locally, that's amazing. I would go with that. Other than that, you're gonna need, you know, obviously lots of colors. They sell these adapters here. I would definitely recommend getting a set of these. I have a ton of them because I've collected them over the years. But yeah, it makes it really easy to switch colors, and yeah. You're gonna need your airbrush, of course, your air hose. I shouldn't have to mention that because, if you're watching this video, you got one. You're gonna probably want a can like this of clear, just for when you're painting something small. I wouldn't use this on shirts or anything that you're gonna wear. Definitely don't use this. This is for stuff that, like little model cars or anything like that. This will help seal up the paint and give it a nice shine. So, a little can of this is good to have around, laying around. Some stencil blanks. These are plastic stencil blanks. I've seen people make stencils out of everything. I personally have used, old 12 can packs of beer or whatever, like the cardboard, and just draw on it and cut it out, and you're basically good to go. But yeah, I think those pretty much it as far as what you'll need and what's good to have. It's always good to have a dedicated space too. Have an area dedicated to painting, and try to keep it nice and clean, and have it be your area for painting. It creates a good area to work in, an atmosphere, and it'll play a lot with your mind too, that you have an area. It's always good to get boards too, like these. I have a ton of these, so you can tell, different sizes. These are just good for putting shirts on. If you're gonna paint a shirt, you slide it on here, and you paint the shirt. Or if you're gonna want to paint something kind of big, you put this on the floor, cover it. You don't get paint all over the floor, like I have. That's where my easel sits. Bam, right underneath. So if you want to avoid messes like that, it's always good to have stuff like this to put around, and where you're gonna be working and stuff. But yeah, other than that, I think that's it. Let's get to the airbrush lesson, and yeah. So before you start this exercise, go ahead and play around with your airbrush for a little bit, mess around on a couple of sheets of paper towels. Just go around, mess with it, get the kind of feel and hang of what's happening when you push on it. Now, when it comes to airbrushes, I would recommend getting a dual action airbrush. And that's one like this, where you can push down, and pushing down activates the air, and pushing down and back activates the paint. So backwards is actually the paint release, and down is the air. This kind of airbrush I recommend because you can switch between a thin line and a thick line on the fly, and that's kind of where airbrushing kind of excels. But yeah, take a few minutes, play around with it, learn what you're doing, and once you're kind of comfortable with it, a good exercise you can start with is just, putting down some paper towels, taping them up like this, and just get used to making dots. And everybody always wonders, why do you do dots? And it's just getting used to making the same size all the time, and you want to do it without letting go of the air. I got to stress that. Do not let go of the air. Hold down the air the whole time you're painting. This first line, watch how I do this. So it's just, and that's just a pretty basic exercise. And that's just to teach you how far back to pull to get, a good basic little dot. You can practice them in different sizes. And again, I want to stress, don't let go of the air. If you could hear it, I'm not letting go of the air. That's, just one right after the other. I'm running about 40 psi, and that's just a good starting point for, if you're going to learn. The Createx paint that I'm using is not reduced. It's straight out of the bottle. as for learning, that's how I would recommend it to start off with. You can over reduce paint to where it's unusable, so it might not be a good idea to mess with that until you're comfortable working with the paint as it is. And once you realize kind of what's happening, and you'll know if you need thicker or thinner paint. No! But yeah, after you get the dots down, the next thing to do would be to just get some lines. If you get some lines, and all a line is a moving dot. So if you can make the dot and then just move it across, and just try to get those as straight and as clean as possible, and it's always just good to learn and how to keep your finger at the same area and move across smoothly without getting, thicker or thinner or wobbly lines, So that's always good to practice too. These are just quick exercises that, you can get used to. The next after this, if you got a line and if you could get a dot, it would be the dagger stroke, or a rat tail as they call it. And again, you want to do all these exercises without letting go of the air. I did not let go of the air between any of these. And that's, to get used to your finger moving up and down, but back and forth, but not up and down. You want to move it up and back and forth, but keep it pushed down always. And, this is just to get your finger control down, because that's all an airbrush is. If you can control your finger, pretty good, then you're going to be pretty good at this. But yeah, once you get those down, and if you think you got the dagger strokes down, you could try a dagger stroke line. Something like that, going, thick to thin to thick again, and that's a good exercise to learn. These, I don't think you'll ever use anything like this, but it's just good to learn control again. A lot of these you're not ever going to be, maybe the dots, maybe you will paint something with just nothing but dots, but a lot of these other stuff you're probably never going to use. But again, it's all about finger control. And once you got these, then you could practice, thick to thin. Some ease like that, where you just go, thick down, thin up, thick down, thin up. It's just good finger control and learning that. And you want to make sure your airbrush is clean. I got a little bit of a, spit there. It happens. But don't get discouraged. You got to learn how to work through that stuff. So when you get a spit, just clean it out and, keep on moving. But yeah, other than that, practice, practice, practice. And, it took me a good 6 months at, 4 to 6 hours a day to actually get kind of decent at it. And it took me years and years before I was actually, proficient, or where people were complimenting my work, genuinely, I guess. You always have family and stuff compliment your work, but when strangers walk up and compliment your work, it feels a lot better. So yeah. But yeah, I thought I'd remake this video, give you guys a new, how to airbrush for beginners. There's a lot more information in this one than the previous one. And yeah, if you have any other questions, let me know down in the comments. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you dislike the video, hit the dislike button. It helps me out either way. Yeah, we'll see you guys in the next video.